I can't really hear what Jeremy says because I got my 2 Stanley Cup rings plugged in my ear. Then it's hard for me to understand what he says.
Hello and welcome to a very special Islanders Anxiety from Lighthouse Hockey and the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Dan Saracini. Joining me in this emergency podcast on this Saturday evening is my friend Michael Leboff. And Mike, bienvenidos a los Estados Unidos. Welcome back from Mexico. I would love to hear all about your trip. I hope to at some point, but I'm pretty sure that you did not expect to come back from your Mexican vacation with your family to find that Patrick Roy is now the head coach of the New York Islanders. I think is that a fair assumption, I think?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very fair assumption. And I'll tell you a little bit about my trip right now because it is kind of connected. And the resort we were staying at, it was filled to the brim with people from Canada. We were one of 2 American families that we came across like the entire trip. Everybody else was from Canada, and a lot of people from, Winnipeg. Met a lot of people from Vancouver. I met the other American family was from Minnesota. One of them was married to a guy from Nashville. So it was like the Islanders road trip was following me a little bit. Then when we got to the airport today, I saw a guy at our gate with an Islanders sweatshirt on. I had my Islanders sweatshirt on. And we were just standing both at a garbage can throwing something out at the same time. And I said to him, like, I have a feeling that the coach is going to be fired by the time we landed. and then when we took off, our flight had a lot of issues with like Wi-Fi and the TVs and whatever. And they said, we're working on the Wi-Fi. We're hoping to get it an hour into the flight. And Emily saw me just sitting there on my phone, just like fidgeting. Like, she's like, what's the point? Like, you're not going to be able to use your phone. It's going to be useless. What are you trying to do? And I said, I know that I'm missing the coaching. Like, I know the Islanders are firing Lambert. I know something's happening. Right. And she's just like rolls her eyes and makes fun of me and probably is reconsidering all her life's decisions at the moment. Isla's sitting in her seat, acting very well and like an adult, and I'm over here like having a meltdown because I can't get onto to Twitter to see if the Islanders coaching changes happen. Get onto the Wi-Fi, nothing. And she's like, see, nothing's happened. You didn't miss anything. 10 minutes later, it happened. And I go up 20 rows to like walk up the aisle to tell my dad. And I was like, yeah, Patrick Roy is the coach. And as I'm walking back, I see that guy with the Islanders sweatshirt, and he's sleeping. Oh. And I woke him up. Yeah. I was like, I thought about it. I'm like, do I wake this guy up?
Right,
he's a complete stranger. He's a complete stranger. I don't know him.
He's going to think you're nuts for what you're about to say. Yeah,
exactly. And I tapped him on the shoulder, and he looked, and he's like, and you could, those like brief, so when someone turns on your lights moments, and you're trying to put the world together as you wake back up from your dream. And here is this strange lunatic in front of him on an airplane. And he's probably thinking, like, what are we being, like, evacuated? What am I missing here? And I said, they fired Lambert. He goes, oh, really? I go, yeah. And Patrick Roy is the head coach. He goes, get the fuck out of here. I said, no, it's true. He was like, that's great. Funny. And then I walked away, and that was it. I didn't see him again. Right. But yeah, it was that was it. And now we get to talk about how it makes us feel.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're going to dive in all this. This is going to be an all Roy episode. Reminder quick that we are on Patreon.
First ever all Patrick Roy episode of Islanders Anxiety.
100% the first ever episode, because we didn't think we would be here. This is a very surreal moment. But reminder that we are on Patreon, patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. Ad-free episodes, bonus podcasts, written posts, and a whole lot more. So sign up today. I assume we're going to have a lot more Patrick Roy content going forward as well. But this was a really weird thing. I was just telling you, my wife and I put together a new dresser that we bought for our daughter at Christmas, and it took a while because it's a dresser and they're a pain in the ass to put together. And as soon as I was done, my knees hurt, my back hurt, my arms hurt, and I was done. And I sat down and I picked up my phone, and there was a whole bunch of text messages from our group chat saying, holy shit, Patrick Roy is an Islander. And I'm like, what, as the goalie? And sure enough, I logged on to Twitter and was like, oh my God, Patrick Roy is now coaching this is insane. And the other thing too was, like, earlier in the morning, again in the same group chat with all of us, like, you were joking about it. I think at 11 a.m. they're going to announce that Lambert is fired. And I was like, there's no way. Not with a game tomorrow, maybe during the All-Star break, but even that's remote. I assume he's going to be here for the rest of the season, as I've said on Anxiety before. And little did I realize that at 4 p.m. or whatever, they would announce the firing, and that Patrick Waugh, and then listen, I'm not going to go into Patrick Waugh's entire playing resume. We all know, we all were around for the heyday of Patrick Waugh for the most part, is now their coach. And this is a surreal moment. And I've sent out tweets, I've had messages, emails, messages talking to you, all kinds of people talking to me. I still have not really come to grips with this. I might not until seeing him behind the bench against the Dallas Stars on Sunday night at 7:00 at UBS Arena. It's so surreal. How is this real? I don't understand.
There's something weird about picture the Islanders logo and the colors in your head, and then picture Patrick Waugh and meshing them together. It's almost like those two things have existed in completely different universes, because when Waugh was Patrick Waugh, like during his salad days, the Islanders were largely just irrelevant. I know that the 93, like the late 80s, 93, there were some good teams, but when Waugh kind of took center stage here in the States in the coolest game on earth, NHL, right? Like that version. Barry Melrose, like ESPN, NHL Tonight, that version of Patrick Waugh. The Islanders, they went, if they were on ESPN, it was for one reason. It was, Bob Beers getting dummied and someone roofing in on Wade Flaherty en route to an 8-1 win for the Flyers or whoever, right?
When I think of Islanders Avalanche games during that era, I think of David Abishir, who was Patrick Waugh's backup, who we became very, very, very accustomed to and knowledgeable of, because he was always the guy playing against the Islanders. It's like, why would they waste Patrick Waugh against the Islanders? It didn't make any sense.
So like none of that makes sense. It is, and it is surreal. And everyone reaching out. Yeah, I've got some friends in Montreal. They're like, "This is so great. I'm so happy for you guys." And I think it's got this weird feel to it. It's got like a bite. The move has some bite to it. I think going from Lane Lambert, who didn't work out. Steve, you made one. I think maybe your best comparison, or I don't want to call it a prediction, but one of your best kind of just analogies or anything was just talking about how Lane Lambert and Steve Sterling felt very similar. Like there was just something about them, and I think that that ended up being very true. The only difference is that when Steve Sterling was let go, the Islanders hired or just promoted the even more anonymous Brad Shaw to be their interim head coach, not Patrick Waugh. And so like Lambert going, we all kind of knew it was going the way it was, and to go from him, who he finally started to say some things to the media the other day, and all of them were, if the players are letting me down, the players are letting us down, whatever. And that was like when I saw the quotes after the Chicago game where he was talking about how he needs more from the players. It's like, this guy's done. Like there's just, that's a coach saying, hey, this isn't on me. Like this is someone else. And if that's like your first kind of sharp back and forth with the media in a season and a half, you're probably on the way out. And now we go to Waugh, and the move, it feels like a mix between like the Mad Mike Milbury Islanders and the Barry Trotz Blue Lamoriello Islanders a little bit. It feels like it has just a dash of Mad Mike to it. And I think that's a good thing. This team might need that. This team we've loved how stable and formulaic and reliable that this team has been, both on and off the ice for quite a bit. And now it feels like, no, they need someone to kind of be driving this train off the tracks. Like, let's go explore the other fork in the road for a little bit here and see what happens. Like this is gonna be fun. I don't know how it's gonna work out. It could blow up spectacularally. But I tell you what, I'm going to the game tomorrow, and if Lane Lambert was still the head coach, I would not be looking forward to it. Yeah. But I might be at UBS Arena and like 1 a.m. just tailgating or something. I'm so excited.
I was thinking about this obviously before the whole Watt thing went down, but if Lambert was at that game at UBS Arena, it would have been like a prison riot. Like it would have been
Yeah.
just like garbage and like flaming pieces of paper flying from the sky, people yelling and screaming, especially if they were like down. I will say this before we finally eulogize Lane for the last time, just to answer your point what you just made. Like having that sort of fire of like a Milbury or somebody like that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The problem is when you're doing that and losing. Like that's always been my thing.
Right.
Like Milbury had this loud mouth and was always talking and talking shit about other teams when he coached the worst team in the NHL. Like you can't do that. Like it drives me nuts when you do that. And like even Doug Waite, like he was a guy, he was a fiery guy and he would get into it with the refs. And I mean, he almost got into it with Shannon Hogan for God's. I mean, who the hell does that? Like the nicest person in the world. Why are you getting on Shannon's case? But when you're in the middle of like losing 12 out of 15 games or whatever it was that the Islanders were doing at that time, that you just look like a huge dork. Like you can't do that, but if Watt can bring a structure to this Islanders team on the defensive end in particular, help his goalies out and also, keep the offense going, I think they should be pretty good. We'll talk about him in a second, but we've talked so much about Lane Lambert. We really should put a bow on this whole kind of misguided year and a half under this guy. I have no doubt that the players liked Lane, but as time went on and you talked about the Chicago game, you talked about the Nashville game, in between was that terrible Minnesota game. They lost in Winnipeg. They played better against the Jets, but ultimately lost because they're just a better team. And then the Chicago game, like to lose in overtime to one of the worst teams in the league after being sort of outplayed for half the game with them on a back-to-back with travel, getting shut out by Buffalo the night before. That's a cry for help. Like there's no way out of that situation. Again, I joked on Twitter that like, we said that after the 7-game losing streak. We said that after the Devils game. We said that after the Sharks game and yada, yada. But as you said before, Lane kind of had a bit of a salty exchange, I guess. And the thing that stuck out to me, and I think a lot of other people, was, calling for more from your players is one thing. But like when you say a lack of respect for the way the game should be played is a problem. Dude, have you watched any of your own team's games this entire time? You have not respected the way the game should be played this entire time. What are you talking about? You guys haven't played a lick of defense in a year and a half. And the thing that drives me the craziest is, and I'm not the first person who said this, I'm sure I've said this on the show, this man stood next to Barry Trotz for how long? And apparently learned nothing about the defensive side of the game that his former boss, knew inside and out and was able to get buy-in from an entire roster. It's unbelievable to me. And I think that line, if you talk to Lou, not that we ever will, but if you ask him, I think that line was probably the literal final nail in the coffin. Like to say that your team lacks respect for the way the game should be played when you're the guy dictating how they play is a bridge you can't come back from. I know I was blown away by that.
You know what was funny was during this whole Lambert, it was clear he was in over his head with this job, and that it felt weird to hate a coach.
Yeah.
Again,
right.
Because we had fallen so head over heels for Trotz, and he was there for a while, and even Doug Waite, right? Doug Waite was here for a season. It didn't work out. It just blew up in everyone's face. And with Cappy, it wasn't like your typical fan base foaming at the mouth over the coach thing. This was your uncle's best friend who shows up to family parties kind of thing. And
with Cappy, it was more like it's just time. Like it's just time. He's
exactly.
Gotta go.
And so there wasn't like that bitter animosity,
right? Yeah.
And I when I was away, I couldn't really get any of the games on TV, and I didn't try too hard because I didn't want to. I made it kind of my goal to just try my best to get away from the Islanders, and didn't work. And so I was listening to Chris King and Greg Picker on radio in my hotel room in the dark. Isla in a crib next to me and Emily, and just sitting there listening, and the Islanders scored the goal in to go ahead in the third period against Nashville, and I'm like, yes, and Emily's like, oh, they won. I said, no, they're up 1-0, and she's like, oh, how much time's left? And I said, too much time, like 8
Yep.
minutes. "Oh, they'll be fine, whatever." And then the Predators scored, and she could kind of feel me like deflate.
Yeah.
She's like, oh no, well, at least they'll get to overtime. I was like, no, they're gonna lose this game in regulation. They know it. And the way it happened too, like the stick breaking on the goal. I've seen the replay. I showed it to her, and she's like, "That's so unlucky." It's not unlucky anymore. It's not. This is just this is a team that first, like, it was the turnover. This was a team that was such a perfect moment to just show why this team was toxic under this coach. That those moments were still happening, even though they had those moments are so specific, like a late game turnover in against a out of conference opponent that you haven't beaten in 5 years, even though they've been mediocre for a lot of it. And you just need to, you have your fourth line on the ice for its second shift in the last minute and a half of the game. Like, this entire kind of calamity, it means that it's not unlucky. That means that you shot yourself in the foot, right? So once that goal went in, I felt it again, like, oh, I actually really don't like this guy right now. And I tried so hard not to hate a coach again, because I get it. Like, you're a little older now. I'm not, 16-year-old screaming at Steve Sterling or Scott Gordon or whatever. And I never held it against Lambert that he was the guy who came in after Trotz too. Because I think that would be really unfair. It wasn't like he pushed Barry out the door and gave Lou the ultimatum, like, look, if you don't push this guy out and bump me up, I'm out of here. And Lou's like, oh man, what are we gonna do if we lose Lane Lambert, assistant coach? Whereas that Trotz was like, I'm probably done coaching after my last year of my contract. And Lambert was as easy a succession plan as possible, and they want to keep things stable and whatever. So I tried not to hold that against him. But with that one broken stick, shattered puck floating over Sorokin's head into the goal in our House of Horrors, all those feelings just came out, and I was just like, I really don't like this guy anymore. Like, I just don't like this guy. I want him out. I want him out so badly. And it only got worse as how many people at when I was in Mexico that I bumped into, I was like, we got to fire our coach. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Dude, you were in Mexico. Like, that's just crazy. Yeah. You weren't vacationing, in Canada or, you weren't down the Jersey Shore. Like, you were in Mexico. You went to a whole other country, and people were still saying they got to fire the coach. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Like, you guys look broken. Like, yeah, no, right. I know. We got to fire our coach. The lady from Winnipeg, I guess I should save some of this for Monday, but I met a lady from Winnipeg who was so apologetic for beating us. She's like, well, you guys kind of needed to win more than us, eh? And I'm like, yeah, we did, but it might get our coach fired. She goes, yeah, it doesn't seem like you guys like him very much from what I'm reading. And I'm like, no, we don't.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we've been there, but and she was super nice. But it was, I don't know if I got mad at her for saying sorry for beating the Islanders, or I respected her more, but
no, it's true. They did need something, and they were not having fun. And I thought about that too. Like, I've been thinking about that for the last couple of games. Like, they just don't look like they're having a lot of fun, because they know that this is wrong. I think that might be, maybe I'm giving the roster a little bit too much credit, but like, Anders Lee was talking about the bad bounces, I think, after the Nashville game, or maybe it was after the Minnesota guy. We haven't mentioned now the 5-0 loss to Minnesota after that Nashville game, which was like just waking up in a pool of your own piss. Like, I don't even know what this was. And the fact that we knew going in, thanks again to John Zella for sitting in for Mike last week. And, when he told me that with a win, Marc-Andre Fleury would pass Waugh for second of all time on the NHL wins list, ironically, now that Waugh, of course, is coaching the Islanders, I knew he was going to win that game. And the next day, when, he and I were joking about, like, oh yeah, I was expecting you to tweet that out. I did. And I added that, well, he's going to get a shutout tonight. And both of those things came true. And the fact that I could see that coming 12 hours ahead of time tells you all you need to know. Like, this team had just checked out, and now what would the worst thing that can happen is definitely going to happen because, as I've said on the show, they have created on the ice an environment that fosters chaos. Like there's just no structure, there's no predictability, there's no a discipline for following a set of plays that will keep the defense keep chances low, limit high danger chances, keep all these shots outside. All that stuff we heard from Trotz for 4 years was gone. And if Lane wasn't teaching the guys that, then they forgot it and he never brought them back, then that's on him. If his game plan didn't include that stuff and they were executing it like they're supposed to and it's just not working, then that's also on him. So either way, pretty much all arrows point to him. And, obviously the coach is always the easiest to fire. And that's what drove me nuts. It's like, this was an environment that fostered chaos. And if that chaos got quieted, then, they could be better. And, to be honest, the funniest thing about the Nashville game was they played that game pretty well. I thought they played pretty well in that game until they scored a goal and then the whole thing fell apart. The chaos showed up again. And I said the same exact thing to my wife who was sitting next to me. I was pumped my fist and she's like, oh, they scored. I'm like, yeah, it's 52 minutes, no goals. It's now 1-0 Islanders thanks to JG Pajot, but there's 8 minutes left. So now it's like, I got to sit and wait. And sure enough, they blew it in regulation, which again, harkens back to that Devils game. And it's just, this stuff has happened too often, too frequently. And yes, they put together a streak last year that got them into the playoffs. That's fine. But like that was just a momentary blip. I think that was the outlier period to this era. And we saw what the main thrust or the main characteristic of this era is, as we've been saying all season, the Islanders play like assholes. So Patrick Waugh's first prime directive in now taking over this, and I hope somebody relays this information to him via us, is that the problem is the Islanders play like assholes. If he can stop them playing like assholes, they can start winning some games. And they have 37 games with which to start winning and get back into playoff picture. And that's what's funny too, is like, people asking, why, Lou, why did you make this move now? Well, the fact is there's 37 games left, which is obviously not a lot. And the Islanders are only, as we speak, 3 points out of a playoff spot. They have 49 points. The Leafs have 52. They're in 7th place. And the Red Wings have 51. So really, they're just 2 points out of the playoff spot. Now, there's a bunch of teams in a similar boat, but the season, mathematically speaking, is far from lost. That said, you only have 37 games left. So you better get on your ass and you better fix it. And so if Waugh can come in and clean up a lot of this chaos that has, enveloped the Islanders over this time, I think they can be very successful. How he does that, I have no idea. So we're going to talk about Patrick. We're going to come back. We're going to take a break and we'll talk about Patrick Waugh on the other side.
And now a word from our sponsors. First is VintageIceHockey.com, where you can get t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, mugs, and more featuring over 100 classic hockey logos. Vintage Ice Hockey also carries our Al Arbor and the Island merch, and our portion of the sales always go directly to the Center for Dementia Research. Use the code ANXIETY20 to save 20% off an order of 2 items. That is VintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. They offer a Rosé, a Pinot Grigio, and a Pinot Noir that was named a 2022 Top 100 Best Buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. All are delicious, priced at less than $15 a bottle, and available at local wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. Please drink responsibly.
Okay, so Patrick Waugh, we all know what he was as a player. We know what he was as a coach in the NHL, sort of. He coached the Avalanche for a couple of years, won the Jack Adams Trophy in the first year, made the playoffs, missed the playoffs the next 2 years, and then just abruptly quit just before training camp 1 year. And that led to an absolutely terrible season for them. I think that was the year they may have ended up with Cale Makar, I think first overall or whatever it was. And we all thought they were dead in the water, but then they came back, and Jared Bednar, won a Stanley Cup with them, who was Waugh's replacement a couple of years later. So I mean, that was a weird thing. What I think a lot of people don't know is that he's been in the QMJHL coaching the Quebec Ramparts for a long time. I'll get to some quotes from the press conference in a minute, but he's apparently been very successful there. He won a Memorial Cup last year. They put together, he's put together a 524 wins, 255 losses, 66 overtime losses in Quebec for the Major Junior Hockey League, and that's pretty good. What do we think the chances are that he can take those strategies and sort of use them on NHL players? Let me start there. Do you think that it's possible to take those tactics from junior and apply them to the pros who are much older?
Yeah, I think it systems wise, it sounds like the Ramparts, a friend of the podcast, very good friend of the podcast, one that we respect and never ever throw shade on or thumb our noses at. Scott Wheeler of The Athletic, the venerable Athletic, one of the most venerable writers at one of the most venerable hockey media outlets that we just so much love here. He wrote that the Ramparts were like a very well structured team, one of the best structured junior team he's ever seen. Last year they were head and shoulders above everybody else in their run. So I think that those things, those X's and O's things, obviously translate over. And what's interesting to me with Wah, the coach, like it's first of all, it's so hard to separate Patrick Wah, the winking goalie in that Canadiens mask in '93, the coho pads and the hulking presence when he was with the Avalanche with that big neck guard. It looked impossible to score on him. Like you said, we didn't have to worry about it because we got David Abisher. But it's so hard to separate that from the coach, and I'm going to do my best to do it. But it's so weird. I went to those Mayan ruins and picked up that mask and didn't realize what the power that it held. That Islanders mask that I got. It was trying to tell me something that it's the mask and the goalie. There's a goalie coming, or I don't know what happened. To separate the player from the coach is tough, and I think a lot of people will have that issue in judging this move. That the Islanders are getting a gigantic presence behind the bench, and what's maybe not mentioned when people will talk about that is that this gigantic presence was just coaching 16 and 17-year-olds the past 5 years, and before he went to Colorado, he was coaching the Ramparts too. Because if you remember, he took some time off after that Avalanche, took a sabbatical, and then went back to the Ramparts.
Right. And
people are like, "Wow, he's going back to the Ramparts to like go back to junior to get back to the NHL again for the second time in his career." And I think that as big a presence as he is, if a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds in Quebec, right? Like in Quebec, where Patrick Waugh is a god, can handle that. Frank Saravalli and Jeff Marek and Elliot Friedman and Nick Kostanika and all these other people, EJ Radic, I think they should, maybe Pierre LeBrun can take a deep breath and realize that if 16 and 17-year-olds can handle like being in a dressing room with this guy, that these guys can maybe do their best to do the same. And so if these teenagers can handle that shadow over them, I don't think it's going to be a problem for the Islanders. Shouldn't be a problem for us as a fan base. But it does sound like he's taken that time to really have some, I don't know, like a retrospective look on how he handled himself in Colorado the first time around. Because one of the questions about, I think ironically from Nick Kostanika during the press conference today was just, what do you consider the difference between Patrick Waugh, the coach with Colorado almost a decade ago, and now in your second gig? And he's like, it's night and day. Like, I've learned so much. And, we make fun of coach speak and the fact that these guys lie all the time. And famous last words from a lot of podcasters, but I'm going to choose to believe that Patrick Waugh will learn from those kind of mistakes. And additionally, like with Lou, you just can't be that brash, right?
Yeah.
So I think that Wah will be able to kind of just take almost everything that has worked with the in junior and apply it to this team, because they don't need much.
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't need a coach to come in here and be like, we got to squeeze blood from a stone.
Right.
They just need a coach to come in here and be like, this is how you see out a game that's 4-2 good guys with 6 minutes left against the worst team in the NHL at home. You know, this is how you clear out the crease to make sure that you're the best goalie in the world can see the puck, because if he sees a puck, he's usually going to stop it.
Yeah.
Those are the things that this team needs. They need some very, it's so weird to say it because this team was built on fundamentals, and now they just need some of that back in their sauce. And once they get that, like the Islanders should be good again. Like it's because when that stuff has shown up this year, they win.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the crazy thing. It's like, where did all that stuff go? But, you know, they had those directives and they had those roles under Barry Trotz, and I think they just need like Adam Pelech is a perfect example. Like Trotz came in and took a guy that I don't think most of us thought was very good and turned him into the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. And I'm not trying to diminish Adam Pelech's skills or hockey intelligence or whatever, but I think part of that was knowing what to do at times in the game and be predictable. That was Trotz's whole thing, was be predictable, not from a standpoint like the other team knows what you're doing, but that your teammates know what you're doing. And so I think, you know, you look at some of the goals that the Islanders have given up and it seems like nobody knows where they're supposed to be. You've got two guys covering the same guy and it opens up some guy on the other side. You've got two guys behind the net, you know, when nobody covering the front of the net, and then there's somebody standing there and, you know, they're hoping that Ilya Sorokin makes a save. It's that kind of stuff that Juan needs to instill here. And that quote you were talking about before, I thought this was interesting too. This comes from Ethan Sears' story in the New York Post, but it's also in the press conference, obviously. Juan said that when I left Colorado, I thought the phone would ring faster, but it did not. And I understood that the way I left Colorado was probably not the best way to do things. But I'm proud of taking the time to go back to junior, working with these guys, learning, kind of resource myself in the game, and making sure that I stay on top of that different culture, because the player of today is different than it was in my times, and it changed. And you have to adjust to the younger guys. And I'm very happy I did this, and I'm very happy that I received this call. It was a very welcome call. So it does sound like he has, you know, realized like how he has to talk to some of these guys. And, you know, of course, the irony is that the Islanders have one of the older rosters in the NHL, but like, I think he just has learned how to talk to players and get the most out of them. And, you know, again, if he can, you know, people change. If he can learn, then anybody can learn. And I thought that was very instructive. The press conference was definitely a great first step. Like, he's got to win some games, let's be honest, starting Sunday night against Dallas, who are beating the pants off the Devils right now. But as a first step, I thought the press conference was actually really good. And, you know, the thing is, too, like you talked about him he can't be brash. I think that's true. But a lot of people are like, oh, you know, he's such a big personality. He's such a, you know, he's got so many strong opinions, and he's got, you know, he's not going to back down. And then obviously you have Lou, who's kind of the same. I think strong opinions are good. I don't think Barry Trotz was a shrinking violet against Lou either. I don't think Barry's like a yes man or anything. But I think that, you know, Lou will respect you in the way you talk to him if you have an idea and it works. You know, I don't think he's just going to dismiss you if you're just like, you know, now if you are like a loudmouth clown, it's one thing. But like, I'm sure that Jacques Lemaire had big ideas. I'm sure Larry Robinson had big ideas. I'm sure Pat Burns had big ideas, and they all were coaches under Lou, and they all had a lot of success. So, you know, I don't think Wah being a you know, a strong-willed guy is going to be a problem for Lou Lamoriello, because I think Lou probably likes strong-willed guys. He's one himself, and why wouldn't he be? I mean, who's not going to listen to Patrick Waugh, whether you're Lou Lamoriello or anybody else? I thought that was pretty interesting. I also like that he talked about he sang all the right tunes in terms of fan engagement. He talked about how he wants fans to like walk with pride wearing the jersey. He talked about walking into the practice facility and seeing all the banners and all the guys he grew up watching, and Trottier and Bossy and all those guys. That's you know, anybody's going to say that kind of stuff, but I don't know, from him, I kind of believe it. I don't know. It seems like, you know, he might actually have some kind of feelings. You know, Barry Trotz wasn't an Islanders guy either. He grew up in Manitoba, but he came in and talked about the same thing. You know, only his guy was Butch Goring and not Mike Bossy. Like, that was it, you know? So I kind of believe him when he says that kind of stuff. Yeah,
well, I think it's like those Trotz and Wah kind of, grew up or came of age in an era where the
Sure.
the Islanders were wet. There was the Islanders way, and the Islanders were a force. And then the next generation right after those two, the Islanders were just in the wilderness. So you don't hear guys like Chris Pronger be like,
Right.
yeah, man, I just really wanted to be like Scott LaChance, so I do believe him. And what I mean about Brash is I think that Waugh's tenure as a coach, because it originally was thought to have peaked in Colorado, and that would probably be it. That there were two very memorable moments, or three, I guess, including him just kind of vanishing, that led to that crescendo, which was in 2008, 9. I can't remember if I was still in high school or if I just started college. He was coaching in junior, and his son was like a goalie there, and he got into that brawl.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was cool.
I think did Waugh like join in on it? And then he got into a fight with Bruce Boudreau when Boudreau was coaching the Ducks and Waugh was coaching the Avalanche, and that happened. And then he had that famous "we got to put our balls on the table" quote when he was coaching Colorado as well. So I think that the latter, the balls on the table quote won't really rock Lamoriello's boat, but of course the other stuff is definitely not what this version of Lamoriello will be looking for. And I think that everyone just associates Waugh with those Waugh the coach with those moments, rather than, like you said, not a lot of people realize this guy just went back to junior to kind of rebuild himself as a coach, which is crazy to think about. Like, this is one of the best goalies in NHL history, a generational player, a generational personality. Those guys, especially in other sports, they just get coaching jobs because teams will be like, well, we'll just hire this guy. It sounds easy enough. It'll be fun. People enjoy it. So he could, I guess I'm as surprised as he is that his phone didn't ring quicker because, especially in soccer, you retire, Wayne Rooney, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, all these guys from one of England's golden generation, once they hung up their cleats, they were immediately just being sought after for coaching gigs. They'd fail miserably, then they'd just get another call, fail miserably, and keep getting calls because that's just how a lot of sports works. But for him to say, I got to go back to the bus is pretty incredible to think about.
Right.
And he does that press conference was it wasn't quite 100% buttoned up. There was a menage a trois reference in there. Some tomfoolery about the 2001 Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
As well. But it showed like enough of his personality that you see, okay, like there is still the Patrick Waugh that we know in there. But he does sound like a man who understands what he had to work on, and he did go work on it. And the other good thing is, like you said, this is like there's 37 games left, so there's not really enough time for him to just like come in and light a fire under everyone and get to start berating Oliver Wahlstrom for like not back checking or Julien Gauthier for taking a bad icing, right? Like there's no time for that. It's basically, I'm here, like we're gonna be. This is the honeymoon period, and by the time the honeymoon period's over, it's gonna be August. So just enjoy it while you can, and hopefully the new manager Bounce, the new coach Bounce, works for the Islanders because it's worked for every team except for the Senators this year. So, and that's all they need. The Islanders need one good spurt because the season's not over. The season, there's a big difference between the season being in a bad spot and the season being over. And right now the Islanders are in a bad spot. Look at like the Lightning, the Penguins, the Devils, even like the Hurricanes. Every one of these teams has found themselves in the exact spot the Islanders are in. Like kind of the Red Wings, kind of just like on the outside of the playoff picture, but with plenty of runway left. And then they just got hot for a little bit, and now they're look at us, we're like third in the division. So
Well, and the Islanders had that first. Like they were second like last week, and now they're shits and they're out. So yeah. So they got that early. But yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like they're in a bad spot rather than the season being over. And it's just funny that like again, it's Patrick Waugh. Like it's just
Patrick Waugh. It's fun to say it.
Yeah.
Carrie Haber, another friend of the podcast, this one, a real one, he just texted me, I'm Patrick Waugh and I'm an Islander. Like it's just, and you could just see it like that. You could, they got to bring back the 2003 game ops team for tomorrow's game only.
Right.
Just film that exact video with like Brendan Witt, Alexei Yashin, all those guys. And then at the very end, because they did it with Ted, you know, and he's like, I'm Ted Nolan and I'm an Islander. You're like, and the crowd just went nuts.
That's funny. Well, it's sort of like if you've ever thought about it, like one of the funniest things about his trade to Colorado was obviously we remember him getting shelled in Montreal by the Red Wings, and still, but he was in goal the entire time. What was his name? What was the coach's name? Mario something or other. Left him in there, and he came off. Mario Tremblay, right? Yeah. And so Waugh says to Ron Caron, who was the president of the Habs at the time, as he's storming off the ice, I'll never play for Montreal Canadiens ever again. And he walks off. And like 2 days later, he was traded to Colorado. Now, obviously, the year before, Colorado was not Colorado. They were the Quebec Nordiques. And, you know, if you just go back a couple of years, there is no way that the Canadiens would have ever traded their starting goalie, you know, even then, Hall of Famer Patrick Waugh, to their hugest division rival. He would, if they were still in Quebec, he would absolutely not have been traded there. God only knows where he would have been traded. But they weren't in Quebec anymore. They were in Colorado. They were, 2,000 miles away from Montreal. So who cares? So they traded him to Colorado, and obviously he wins 2 more cups there. But it's like, if you've ever thought about that from that perspective and have thought of like Patrick Waugh wearing a Quebec Nordiques jersey, it doesn't compute, right? It's the same here. Like, I know he's not going to be wearing the jersey, but it's just so funny that here he is.
It's just,
yeah, it's just so strange.
There's nothing, and honestly, I do. It does feel a little bit like the Nolan move again.
Yeah, sure.
Because that one, we're talking about a big presence, a guy who, another Jack Adams Award winner,
right?
Who then disappeared from the coaching circuit for different reasons, of course, for a while, and then the Islanders were the ones to take the chance to like bring him back and see what's left in the tank there, and it was a risk, and you could see the upside, and of course that hiring also coincided with another goalie taking a position with the Islanders at the same time, but you could see the risk but also the reward of it, and this is the same thing. It's a coach who the Islanders basically abandon all of the baggage from the season right now. Like you just take that and just drop it off your shoulders because it's over. Right. Now it's a completely different outlook on what the season's going to be, and it could end up being an absolute disaster. The Islanders could could not work. It might not mesh. Waugh maybe just doesn't get this group, whatever happens, or this is exactly what this team needs, and this is exactly what us as a fan base have been asking for weeks, and that's been the frustrating thing, is like we saw this coming. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that blowing a 4-goal lead to the San Jose Sharks in December. November, whatever it was, I don't know, was probably a glaring sign, because it wasn't a blip. Right, that was like the 8th or 9th time at that point that had happened. And so like even that stuff, like we've been calling for it. It finally happened. Maybe it's too late. Maybe it wasn't. But just drop all that, and now it's time to just get off the old ride, get into this new one, and just see where it goes, because it's
right.
I got no idea. I have no idea where it's going to go, but it's going to be so much fun to be in the same foxhole as this guy. Like I never ever could have imagined being in the same foxhole as Patrick Waugh. Right. But now he's got our back and we got his back.
And that brings up a good point, because we know now that when Barry Trotz walked into the Islanders locker room 5 years ago, the Islanders stood up and took notice because he had just won the cup with the Caps. Obviously, he was a respected coach before that. Everybody knew him. And it was pretty obvious that John Tavares had just left, and now here this guy comes in with quite a coaching record. And the Islanders stood up and took notice. And they knew that this guy was a big hire for this team because most of them, their coaches had been Jack Capuano and Doug Waite, who was Jack Capuano's assistant, right? So this guy was totally from outside the organization with a totally very good winning record. He was already the second most decorated coach the team had ever had after Al Arbor went walking in the door. And he got a lot of buy-in, and that was how the Islanders were successful. They all bought into his structure and his game plan. Now, is that why Lou went specifically for Patrick Waugh? Because he said this was the guy he had on his radar, and this was the guy that he was going to make the move to bring in with no other candidates. This was the guy. And I wonder if that's an aspect of it. That's a little disturbing if it is, to be honest with you, that, the Islanders need, they're not going to take some great value brand coach coming in and telling them what to do. But Lane was on their bench for 5 years or 4 years. You'd think they would have listened to him. But listen, if bringing in Patrick Waugh is how you get the Islanders to listen, then this might work. And it may, be like you said, he might be the guy. Unfortunately, he's not going to have a lot of practice time. They have a game set Sunday, as we know. They have 3 games next week, including one in Montreal. That'll be a lot of fun. And then they're off for the All-Star break. And they're off for a week. The All-Star break happens, and then they're right back at it after that week to play the Leafs in Toronto right after that break. So he might have a couple of days practice in there. I don't know. I don't know if they're even allowed to. I think most of the guys probably have vacations booked and whatnot. So that, to me, that kind of worries me. It's they're not going to have a lot of practice time. But again, I don't think this team really needs that much. They just need to, once again, learn how to not blow a 4-1 lead to one of the worst teams in the league, like you said, or, not give up a game-winning goal with 7 seconds left because you don't throw the puck out of the zone when you're making a pass when you could just throw it out of the zone. I don't understand. So maybe they just need that kind of stuff and it will turn around in a quick way, and we'll see. And again, that's the thing too. I don't know how this is going to go. All I know is that Lambert wasn't the guy. That's the only thing we know right now. Lane Lambert wasn't it. So whether this works or not, we have no idea.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the aspect of this that I'm sure a lot of you were hoping we would get to. The outside perspective on the Islanders hiring Patrick Waugh. Now, we've already heard from a lot of people, as we said, friend of the podcast, Scott Wheeler. I'm just kidding. Friend of the podcast right now on January 20th. He is a friend of the podcast. We'll see how long that lasts. But, there's already been a lot of voices and a lot of talking and a lot of, oh, this is great. This is bad. This guy's a moron. This is that. All I'm going to say is this, and I said this on Twitter, so I am paraphrasing myself, but it's 100% true. I have been an Islanders fan for almost 40 years, and I have seen many coaches come and go. Some come back, which is kind of funny too. And the one thing, and they're all different guys. They're all different personalities, and the teams had different kinds of, varying degrees of success. The one thing that I know that unites all of those guys was that there were voices at the time saying that this was going to work or this wasn't going to work, and nobody knew what the hell was happening. You can never know. I can find you articles written in print about what a great hire Mike Milbury was in 1995. I can find you that. He's the perfect guy to lead this team, and he's the perfect, general to whip these young guys into shape. Spoiler, he was not. Okay. And I can find just as many articles saying that Barry Trotz was never going to win here. He didn't have Ovechkin. We had no goalie. Tavares was gone. This roster stunk. This was a dumb idea, but it worked out pretty well. Who's this guy, Peter Laviolette from the AHL? I don't know. He's some hot shot. Well, let's see how it goes. Well, it turned out to be pretty good, So I don't think anybody knows what's going on. There's going to be a million articles and a million podcasts and a million charts and blobs and all this kind of stuff. And they're all going to try and tell you what they think is going to happen, and nobody knows. And it might end up being a disaster, but it might end up being good. It might end up being great. It might end up being anywhere in between. So whether it's rando jabronis on Facebook, data stealing stats nerds on Twitter, shit eating snark meisters on The Athletic, goofball dorks from Sportsnet, nobody knows anything. Nobody knows anything. No, that's the great William Goldman line. Nobody knows what makes a movie a hit or a bomb. Same here. Nobody knows anything. So we'll see what happens. And if the dumpster catches on fire, well, hey, at least we tried, right? Like Lane wasn't it. So there you go. That's my 2 cents. So before you get into it with Dom or Wheeler or any of these other idiots, just remember, you have watched more Islanders games than they have. You, whoever you are listening to this, you have watched more of the New York Islanders. You are more of an expert on this team than any of those people. So they don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on. So we'll have to see what happens. So think about that before you reply to somebody's article. The Patrick Waugh gambit is a mistake. They should have fired Lou at the same time. Fire the whole team into the sun. I don't know. That's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well put. The thing I'll add, and something I always like to say in the, whether here or online change at work, that around season preview time is nobody knows how a season's going to just unfold. And I don't mean about that like wins and losses and stuff like that. Just generally, just like think weird stuff happens off the ice. Guys get traded who were, untradeable. 6 months, like Andrei Kuzmenko signed that contract extension that basically ended up sealing Bo Horvat's fate to be traded to the Islanders. And now the Canucks are trying to trade Andrei Kuzmenko less than a year later.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that just happens. Nobody knows what's going to go on. So let's put it this way. If you and I, for our season preview episode, October 10th or whenever it was, the one right before the Islanders started the season against the Sabres, and I said to you, you know what my prediction is, Dan? Patrick Waugh ends the season coaching the New York Islanders. You'd just be like, okay, like it's not, it wouldn't even be funny. It wouldn't have been a good bit, right? But it just goes to show you, just nobody knows anything.
Right.
Nobody.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to get bent out of shape on those kind of projections or previews or anything, because they don't mean anything. And the worst part about it is those people will be wrong who make those predictions and projections, and then just won't ever mention it again.
Yeah.
But if they're right, and they say, I told you Patrick Waugh wasn't going to be a good coach for the Islanders. Now look at him. He's healthy scratching they're Simon Holmstrom or something. Like, you guys got no idea what he's doing. If they're right about it, like, then of course there's a parade thrown. So yeah, just don't listen to it. Enjoy the fact that try to wrap your head around it. It's hard. I'm trying to do it my best I can. A little jet lagged. I can't believe it. Just a plane ride that I'll never forget.
You know what this makes you now, by the way? This makes you an official beat writer for the Islanders. Because Art Staples always like, I'm about to get on a plane. This is when this guy's going to get traded. This guy's going to get fired, blah, blah, blah. And so now you have done it. You have lived that experience.
Yep. And I couldn't. And also I was traveling with a 2-year-old. Like, I was almost 2. So I'm trying to do my best to help keep her in line on a plane.
Right.
And also appropriately come to grips with Patrick Waugh being the new head coach of the Islanders. It's what a day this is. And it's going to make this team pretty fascinating for the next few weeks. And they were anything but.
Right.
Yes. For the first couple weeks of 2024. Right. That there was a fun game against the Leafs. One thing I do want to bring up from that press conference was great was somebody asked Patrick Waugh and you even made a joke about this, about like basically his familiarity level with the team. And he's like, I watched the game against Toronto, which was about a week and a half ago now. So that tells you that this conversation between Lou and Waugh had been going on for a bit.
Right.
And then he goes, I accidentally watched them play the Los Angeles Kings. And you're like, well, that was in December.
Yeah. It was before Christmas.
Yeah. And the way he said it too, he's like, I watched them against Los Angeles Kings accidentally. Like, Lou probably shot him a look. He's like,
that's very funny. Fell asleep and he woke up and the Islanders Kings game was on.
That's And his voice also, like you think of Patrick Waugh, the presence that we've been talking about, his voice does not match that presence. It's like very understated, francophone in a not. It's not the most romantic francophone accent out there, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds almost a little watered down than anything. Well, when he starts ordering coffees and bagels and stuff on 7th Avenue in Garden City and starts hearing the way people talk, it's gonna get that accent's gonna get even more mangled. There's a great tweet by somebody who, God, I'm really sorry that I don't have the Twitter account because it's hilarious. He's like, if he hasn't thrown like a fit in a bagel shop by the end of next week, he's lost his touch.
I wonder if he's gonna be like, wow, this is Long Island, huh? Like this guy played in the league for how long? And he never
David Appicher used to tell me that it was just
right.
You would just cross the parking line, and there wasn't much to it when he would play. I would just stay asleep in the hotel room.
Right, yeah. He's never spent more than 3 hours on Long Island ever in his entire playing career or coaching career. Like he's probably like, oh my God, they have like beaches and stuff. Your golf is here? Wow, that's crazy. I think I'm looking forward to that as well. I am going to leave us. We're gonna wrap it up soon, but I do want to read this quote here. I'm paraphrasing. I'm changing some of the names here, but I think this is a very interesting article, and I think it's a very interesting set of quotes. And I'm gonna put a link here, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. But the quote goes like this: "They are in need of a coach who will instill structure to the group while being able to maximize the team's offense creatively. Waugh has brought structure to the Ramparts. They are in need of a coach who will make it his business to get the most of their kids. He's been coaching teenagers for the past 5 years, 13 overall, and 2 separate stints with Quebec, and has also been GM. They lacked a forecheck. They lacked a way to break out. Flatlined in the playoffs. Players are quiet. There's little rah-rah in the room. There is no one to emotionally take charge. It doesn't make them bad people, bad players, or bad leaders, but it is not in their nature. It is, however, in the nature of Patrick Waugh." That comes from an article from June 1st of 2023 from another friend of the podcast, good old Brooksy, Larry Brooks. And the headline says, Patrick Waugh is exactly what the Rangers need.
Oh my God.
So
God, it feels like a Dewey. You need to take a picture of yourself in black and white. Dewey defeats Truman.
I'm going to do that. I'm doing that after this. I'm going to do that to Truman with the thing up. I'm going to definitely do that. Anyway, so I just wanted to leave us all with
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh my God. You know what's funny? I remember his name being thrown around a bit in the summer. And
apparently, the headline segment of Hockey Night in Canada tonight, Elliot Friedman goes into other teams that we're going to hire Patrick Waugh before the Islanders got to him.
The biggest story in the NHL today, aside from Hockey Day in Canada, is the return of Patrick Waugh. The New York Islanders deciding today to let go of head coach Lane Lambert and replace him with Patrick Waugh. An announcement I don't know if anybody saw coming. Lou Lamoriello works his secretive magic again. Now, one of the things that Lamoriello said was Waugh was the only person he talked to, and that's why he's here. But one of the things that's clear is 7 years after Waugh left Colorado, a move that he again said today should have been handled a lot better, he was getting back on some teams' radar. Now, Doug Armstrong, the GM of the Blues, said that when he made his coaching change, that he wasn't going to tell anybody who he was talking to and wasn't going to update the process. But there were some teams who suspected Waugh was on the Blues' radar. And Nick has said on his radio show with Justin that when he was in the process in Ottawa, he recommended Patrick Waugh for a coaching role there. So Waugh was starting to go, and he gets this opportunity. It's a huge story, and we'll see where it goes. The Islanders play in Montreal next week.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good that the bit just continues.
Right.
Here, they stole Bo Horvat away from the other teams that wanted him. And
right.
now look at them taking this guy now too. Like when?
Right.
And I remember when his name got brought up a bit in the summer. We even made fun of it as a bit on the show. And if we did, we apologized to our new head coach because we didn't mean it like that. Because I think Friedman kept saying, teams are interviewing him, but they're just kind of putting their toe in the Patrick Waugh waters here. They want to just kind of see, and it doesn't seem like this will be, he'll be like a strong candidate this time around, but a lot of teams are interviewing him for his next interview. When they have their next head coaching vacancy,
Of course they are,
and stuff like that. And we're like, what does that even mean?
right.
Yeah, it's crazy. Patrick Waugh.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's such a
Rangers
name to say too. It's just the way that name.
It's fun.
When you've been around hockey and you've been watching hockey, you grew up around the same time, or we're a hockey fan in the 90s. Let's say, just that name. It kind of like sucker punched you a bit,
right?
Especially when Gary Thorne would say it. You just hear Gary Thorne say the word Patrick Waugh, and you're like, oof. Like a shiver up her spine, and it never had any jeopardy for the Islanders to it either, because they were just so far out of the picture. So he was just a star of the sport, being played at such a different level than the Islanders.
Oh, it was like a separate universe. Yeah. It was like an alternate universe, basically. Like Patrick Waugh
getting into fights with the Red Wings and all that shit, and the Islanders they're like doing the cute little. Here's our little brawl with the Rangers, who also sucked at the time too. So it wasn't even like that had any juice to it.
Right. I was watching the Ravens Texans playoff game before, and my wife was like, "Oh, are the Jets playing this weekend?" I'm like, "The Jets are watching this game. They're taking in the playoffs the same way we are, sitting at home in their sweatpants watching this game on TV. The only way they were getting into the playoffs was with a ticket. Like these people. Like, what are you talking about?"
I had a better chance of seeing the Jets in Mexico.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But that was how it worked. Like they were a completely separate universe. Like we saw Hasek a bunch of times, obviously playing in Buffalo, and they would play him every once in a while. For some reason, the Islanders had Hasek's number, or at least Ziggy Palffy did. I guess they were, they had a thing going on, but he was sort of in their universe. But even Gretzky to a certain degree was never in their universe, because he played even when he was a Ranger. Like it just seemed kind of weird. But yeah, so this is a very, very strange thing. But you know what? As somebody again in my mentions before was like, it's a pair of outside eyes. Like it's not a person who's
the first
who's been around this thing. So yeah, and Trotz was that too.
Yeah.
So I mean, don't forget, before they hired Trotz, like the year before, he was saying that that was one of the easiest games he and the Caps played. They were just easy to play against, and then 6 months later, he's coaching them. So it's good to get.
And the funny thing about when you and I talked about I'll have to go back and listen to the episode we did right after that Sharks game, because we started talking about different coaches, because we assumed that right after that they went on like a little road trip or something, and we're like, we're doing this on Sunday night. By Monday morning, we're expecting the Islanders to hire the coach.
Yeah.
And we went through like Gallant, and we went through Berube wasn't fired at the time. I don't know.
I think Hines was the guy, because he hadn't been hired yet. Yeah.
And that was the point I was going to make, was everybody kept going back to the same names, because everyone says Lou will only bring in the guys that he knows.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, he's now hired 3 coaches for the New York Islanders, which is weird to say too. And 2 of them he had no relationship with before. Right? Like Trotz, he didn't know Trotz. They knew each other just because they were both hockey dudes, and he didn't really know Waugh besides same kind of thing, right? So the only one he knew was Lambert because of Trotz. So it's not like he's been doing that. It's not like he's been. We joke about it because here comes Parisi and Palmieri and Zajac and Andy Green, and Leo Komarov comes for the Leafs, and so does Martin and all that stuff. But so we make those jokes, and they're whatever. But the outside look that he only brings in guys he has these like long-standing relationships with is a little off, because he keeps
seriously
bringing in people like even Horvat, right? Like he didn't have anything with Horvat. I was traded away the pick that Horvat ended up being.
I was terrified that they were going to hire Mike Babcock because of that relationship that they had going back to Toronto. But no, we've talked about this, and I don't want to go off on a whole other thing, but like I think the Lou that people think he is outside of the walls is not really accurate. Like it's, again, it gets back to Lou has traded 1,000 players in his career, and every single one of those guys would take a bullet for the guy. Like, they love the guy. You know, I mean, how many Islanders have been traded and they just love talking? They love Lou. Like, it doesn't matter that he got traded. They love the way he runs the team and how he takes care of everybody. And when Watt talked about that too, it's like such a tight team. It's like a family that really appealed to him. So, well, he's in it now. So we'll see how it goes, how it works. And we don't have a lot of time to wait because Sunday night against Dallas, we'll see how it goes. Okay, let's wrap this sucker up. I'm assuming that every other Islanders podcast is going to have an episode out about this. So I'm looking forward to listening to them all. I'm looking forward to getting everybody's takes on it. It should be a fun Sunday/Monday to hear what everybody has to say. So it should be a good time. I am going to go with the punny title of What the Hell Just Happened? ROY ' just happened. So we'll see if anybody else also does the punny title, but I don't know. I'm hoping they don't. Reminder that March 30th, Offside Tavern, 4 p.m. is our live event. It's a Weird Islanders party, so bring your Weird Islanders gear, shirts, jerseys, you name it. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your story for a live podcast coming after that. So March 30th, Offside Tavern, New York City, 4 o'clock. Be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Sign up at patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety for ad-free episodes and bonus content. Follow us on Twitter at IslesAnxietyPod. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and at Spotify. Our theme music is Morning Haze by Family Dinner. Listen to more of their music on Bandcamp and Spotify. Of course, read Lighthouse Hockey every single day for most up-to-date Islanders news and discussion, including and especially about this Waugh hiring. That was me with the banner, by the way. I thought it was kind of funny. Yes, they're hired Patrick Waugh. Yes, we're serious. That Islanders podcasts are part of the Fans First Sports Network. Find more about them at fansfirstsports.com. Shop vintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. Michael Leboff, freshly back from the beautiful country of Mexico. Any final thoughts on the insanity of what you came back to after stepping off that plane and finding out that Patrick Waugh is now head coach of the New York Islanders?
You know, I feel almost relieved, honestly. It's there's a lot of it's good confusion because I don't think it's going to be exciting. This is a absolute sucker punch out of nowhere in a good kind, just the wind snapping your neck or something and like doing some whiplash. I don't know any of the other metaphors I can use here, but it just, the record scratched and in walked Patrick Waugh, and I am so excited now. I just am, Lane Lambert gets the Islanders to the playoffs in his first season and kind of limps out the door. And you do feel for the man a bit, but now it's like all that is just in the past. It's the Islanders now have 37 games to save what would looked and still can be a promising season. And the guy charged with it is Patrick with doing that is Patrick Waugh. It's every one of us was our default setting was that Lamoriello was just going to kind of go with the John Heinesian kind of move, and now he brought Patrick Waugh, so it's time for, Lou did that, and Waugh came here, so now it's time for the fans and to kind of get excited about that because there's no reason not to be. There's just no reason not to be. You could be like, you could think it's going to be a bad fit, go right ahead, but there's no reason not to be excited just for the change and that the change is coming in this form of an absolute legend and a personality so gigantic that it's going to be an absolute circus. I'm so excited.
Yeah. You're right. A chapter is closed. A new chapter is open. And the best part is we don't have to talk about those last 3 shit games anymore because we just got it over with. They're done. They're dusted. We don't need to talk about them anymore. They're over. And new chapter starts Sunday night against Dallas. So good point. And that is it for us. So thanks for listening. We'll be back on Monday with a new episode chronicling whatever happens against the Stars on Sunday night and about the first part of this new chapter. And then we'll be back the week after with our, pre All-Star game thing. But thanks for listening, and we will talk to you again very, very, very soon. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.